Hi, this is Shelle Soelberg. I'm the founder of Let's Play Music, and today I am delighted to be on the Musicality podcast.
Ever wondered why some people seem to have a gift for music? Have you ever wished that you could play by ear, sing in tune, improvise and jam? You're in the right place. Time to turn those wishes into reality. Welcome to the Musicality podcast with your host, Christopher Sutton.
Hi, this is Christopher Sutton, founder of Musical U, and welcome to the Musicality podcast. Today I'm joined by Shelle Soelberg, the founder of Let's Play Music, an early music education program popular across the United States. But as you'll learn in this episode, the tools they're teaching to young children can actually be just as powerful and transformative for adult learners. In fact, Shelle herself discovered them only after reaching college. Shelle started teaching in this way in 1998, and in 2002 she started Let's Play Music to share her method with other teachers. There have since been over 400 teachers trained in this approach, impacting the early music education of over 20,000 students. At a glance, Let's Play Music may seem like just a fun way for children to experience music, but don't let the upbeat spirit and joy of Let's Play Music fool you. There is seriously impressive training going on, and the young graduates of this method are able to do some things in music that many adult musicians only dream of. In this conversation, we talk about Shelle's own music learning and the late discovery of two tools that transformed how capable and confident she felt as a musician. Shelle shares how learning music theory, which was such a dull slog for many of the music students around her, was actually the gateway to truly understanding the music she was playing. And she reveals the one thing you can do that actually makes learning theory fun and useful. Shelle also talks us through some clear and simple examples of how learning those two tools can benefit you immediately in music. If you've ever felt bored or overwhelmed by music theory, or you've wondered about where to start in order to actually comprehend music by ear, I know this conversation is going to inspire you and give you some really valuable pointers for your own musicality training. My name's Christopher Sutton, and this is the Musicality podcast from Musical U. Welcome to the show, Shelle. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Let's
start at the beginning. Could you tell me a bit about your early experiences learning music yourself?
Yes. So I grew up with somewhat of a musical training. I had it in public schools. I begged my mom to be in piano lessons, but it never happened. Music was not very valued in my home, and so I knew that it was in me, though, and so I pursued it through public school and got a fairly good training there. So much so that I decided to major in music, and I was primarily a singer in high school. I had such interest in music that I did pick out the piano. I played the clarinet in school band, but it wasn't until I got to college that I actually understood music, and until I really knew, I understood how it was put together. Until then, I like to say I was an observer. Even though I was participating in music, I really was more of an observer because I didn't understand the workings of music. So certainly wouldn't have called myself a musician in high school, just a singer and an instrument player.
That's really interesting, and I can totally relate to that myself. Was that frustrating for you? Did you feel limited in your music making? Because you were pretty committed by the sounds of it. You know, you were learning different instruments, you pursued it, you even decided to major in music. But by the sounds of it, there was something kind of missing emotionally or psychologically or, you know, in terms of what you could do.
Absolutely. I was so envious of my friends in piano lessons. And of course, they would say, you don't have to practice. This is torture. And I thought, oh, no, this would be heaven. My family actually acquired a piano when I was in 7th grade. And so I did. I pulled out books and I taught myself, and I learned how to play, you know, on an average level, I guess. But I was truly envious of those who got real music instruction. And like I said, I had great parents. They nurtured me and they helped me. They just didn't understand. They really didn't understand music education. They didn't know what needed to happen. They thought, oh, she's taking it at school. She's fine.
So what was it that was missing? What were you seeing other people do that made you feel like you weren't quite there yourself? Was it purely about the kind of level of instrument technique, or was it about the kinds of ways they were using their instrument?
At that point in high school, it was just the longing to be able to play, particularly the piano, as well as I saw others play it. Of course, I saw it as an instrument that can produce harmony and accompany. I was a singer, so I wished I could accompany myself. I wished I could accompany others. It's just such a useful skill when you're a musician, when you get together and everybody wants to pull out the Broadway show tune books and sing together. And I couldn't sight read well enough to be able to do that. I could work on a piece and learn to play it, but I wanted to sight read piano so badly. And it just wasn't in the cards for me, unfortunately.
Gotcha. So you did decide to major in music and you headed off to college. Was singing still your primary focus?
It was, yes. I did go primarily as a vocalist and was surprised that I had to learn theory, that I had to do 2 years of college theory. And I heard so much moaning and groaning about it. And in high school even, I had heard my peers moan and groan about theory. I had no idea what theory was. I didn't even know what they were talking about. I had a very vague understanding of what a chord was because I knew that multiple tones produced at the same time produced a chord. I had no idea what chords actually were. So when I got to college and got in that very first theory course, my mind was literally blown at the basics behind chord theory, how music is put together. I was absolutely blown away, nearly to the point of tears several times in class, looking around at the people with me, and they had been playing piano forever, had been in multiple theory classes. They knew this was boring. It was old news to them. And I would look around and say, are you hearing this? Do you know what this is? Do you understand and comprehend what this does to our power as musicians? And I didn't feel like they did. I honestly felt like they had sort of missed it somehow, that in the drudgery of learning theory, they had missed the magic of it. And I was blown away. I just didn't understand why they weren't fireworks going off their heads and they weren't tap dancing on the desk because of what we were learning about, for example, modulations. That was such a mystery to me in high school. Such a mystery. How does it, I can tell that it's in one key and then it changes mysteriously to another key. I had not a concept of how the simplest of modulations, C major to F major, had no idea how that would happen. I knew that C major had no key signature or, no sharps or flats, and that F major had a B flat, but what that meant, no idea. So when I learned, it was life-changing.
That's wonderful. I love hearing you describe it with such passion because I think a lot of people in our audience are in that boat of having kind of assumed that learning music means learning your instrument and probably shied away from music theory because, like you described for your high school friends, it's often taught in such a dry way and without any kind of hint of how useful it can be or how powerful it can be for your music making. And it's wonderful to hear that when you were finally offered that opportunity to kind of peek behind the curtain and see how things work, it just hit you so hard. And it really, by the sounds of it, it transformed your relationship with music.
Yeah, absolutely. So in a way, maybe I'm lucky. Maybe I came about it the right way, even though I felt inhibited in high school. Maybe my way was a better way to suddenly be, I loved music. I loved music. And to suddenly be shown how it worked was just fantastic.
So tell me a bit more, how did your musical life change once that kind of light bulb went on, or once you discovered that music theory could empower you in that way?
At that point, I was then able to, of course, my theory work became easier and enlightening and better. So lots of exercises, lots of chances to work out a modulation or a chord progression or analyze a piece and figure out how that was going to work. In real life, I was involved in choirs. I was involved in some groups just on the side, and I was able to make intelligent comments. Oh, I know what you're talking about now. A B flat chord is going to work in the key of F, and it sure wouldn't have worked in the key of C. That wouldn't have happened. It would have actually changed us to the key of F. So I was just able to communicate and have musical ideas. If we were arranging something, if we were figuring out how something was going to play together, or how we were going to make a piece work, or maybe compose a medley, I was able to make that happen. I was able to transform. And of course, improvisation. I mean, not being a great pianist and a great reader, now being able to understand chords, I was able to play the piano much better, astronomically better, because I could read the chords that were, most keyboard music has the chords written above, and I could just look at the chord and play the appropriate notes that I knew were in those chords. And I sounded like I was playing an accompaniment, even though I was ignoring the notes on the page, because I really couldn't, my fingers still to this day, if you want to know if I'm still inhibited, I am. I didn't play piano at a young age. I am not good at playing the piano. It's not what I've spent time practicing. And so I wish I was better at the piano. I can't sight read a piece, but I can improvise on the chords if you put something in front of me. So my piano playing increased to the level that I could accompany myself now, just because I understood chords. My fingers couldn't keep up with the sight reading. I couldn't play all of the notes. I wasn't as coordinated as I should have been had I played years of Hanon and years of scales and cadences. Had I done that, I would be a great sight reader. But just being able to now read a lead sheet was just beautiful. And, this didn't happen overnight. It was after 2 years of theory where I really understood the chords, and I knew how to improvise. I knew how to create different feelings. So obviously a broken rolling chord is going to create a different feeling than a jazzy syncopated chord. But either way, it was just using the notes of the chord. So it was incredibly empowering to learn those chords.
That's fascinating. I'd love to dig a little deeper there, just because it sounds like part of it for you, part of the reason it hit you so hard was that you came to it a bit later and you'd maybe been immersed in music without that theory knowledge.
Absolutely.
And so when you finally got it, that was powerful. But I talked to a lot of adult musicians who are maybe in a similar boat where they haven't yet put that theory piece in place, but what they find is they look around and they try and study the theory, and it can be quite overwhelming and intimidating. I'd love to know a bit more about how the theory was taught to you, or if you think there was a particular reason it was so practical for you and you were able to see, all of these wonderful applications that could make you a more versatile and creative and free musician. Because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yes. Let me think about that for a minute. Because as you know, in Let's Play Music, the reason that it is created is for musicians to not only have the same magical discovery that I did, but to have it at an age where it would truly impact their skills and their musicianship. So we introduce these chords to them as 4-year-olds. So let me think about an adult perspective. I feel that still the key of C is the best place to learn the chords. I think it's important to learn without the sharps and flats. And I really do feel that the use of a keyboard is an important instructor. I know guitar is fantastic to play chords on, but it doesn't have the same effect when learning chords, because the keyboard gives you a visual feedback of how the chords are laid out, and it can really give you instruction as you are playing it. So the keyboard becomes the teacher. So I would say that the important thing to do, if you're really struggling with a foundation of chords and cadences, would be to play, for example, a C chord, and then an F chord, and then a G chord, and then a C. Why don't I have a keyboard here in front of me? I could run get that if that would be helpful, because I could play some things. Do you want me to run get that?
Sure, let's do that. Okay,
so if you're going to play a C chord, and then you want to play your F chord, and then your G chord, and you can add a G7 if you want, and then go to your C chord. You've just played the very most basic cadence there is, your 1-4-5-5-7-1 cadence. And when you play that often enough, your fingers begin to feel what those chords feel like. And then you can transpose to the key of F, and it doesn't feel so very different to play the very same cadence in the key of F. And I think that understanding, I guess, would it be when you begin in the key of C and then play the triads in their root position up the keyboard. So the D chord, the E triad, the F, the G, the A, the B diminished, and then up to your C again. Understanding that those are all triads and that they're built in thirds. And then understanding the major scale positioning with its whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Then that helps you to understand the tonality of each of those triads. So the major triads being the 1, the 4, and the 5. And obviously those are the ones that make up 85% of the music that we listen to. And then understanding how to use the minor triads, the 2, the 3, the 6, to then color whatever you're wanting to improvise with or accompany. But when your ear could hear, when you're listening to a chord or a song and you're wanting to figure it out by ear, and you think, okay, is that a major triad? I'm hearing this. What are the pieces of that chord? What chord am I listening to? I hear a do and I hear a fa and a la. That is a fa la do. So it must be a 4 chord in the key of C. So when you could use solfeggio, and I know I just jumped into solfege right there from chord theory, but when you can use solfege to then analyze the chords you're listening to, then suddenly you can play anything by ear, literally anything by ear. So when you're first introducing your ear to those chords, sit at a piano and play every chord and sing do, mi, so, re, fa, la, mi, so, ti, fa, la, do, re, so, ti, re, la, do, mi, ti, re, fa, do. Sorry if I was a little off.
I thought that was a really beautiful demonstration of the answer to my question. So I asked, for someone who's struggling with music theory and finding it dry or overwhelming or intimidating, were you taught in a particular way? And I think you just beautifully illustrated the answer, which was yes. In fact, the way you chose to learn it was very practical and very ear-based, because, I come from the UK music education tradition where, and I think it's similar in the US, where music theory basically means writing down answers on a piece of paper, and if you said, let's learn about chord progressions or cadences in music theory, it's very intellectual, it's very kind of logic and fact-based. And for me anyway, for the first 10, 15 years of my music education, there was almost no connection with the music I was actually playing. And you just beautifully illustrated how actually, what we call music theory can be so much more alive, and it can be so much more physical and practical in the way that real music is. And so for you, when you say, let's do the music theory of chord progressions, or that was what was interesting to you in college, it's because you were sat down at a keyboard and you were playing through these things and listening for the effect they had in music.
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly right. And then to be able to listen to a Beatles song or a Mozart symphony and say, aha, I just heard that he went from a 1 chord and then a 4 and then he went to a 5 and he was holding that 5 and then he went to a 6 chord. Mind blown. He just did a Deceptive Kings. And then you hear the same thing in Beatles. And you can really connect the genres of music using theory, and I feel like that makes you a musician as well. I feel like when you can extrapolate techniques from both Bach and the Beatles and say, aha, I know what they're doing there. I know why that created an emotional response in me, because they just took this chord that wasn't supposed to go there and they went somewhere else with it. And all of a sudden, you got chills all over your body.
Absolutely. So you mentioned something in passing there that we haven't really covered yet, which is solfeggio, also known as solfa or solfege. Could you tell us a little bit about how that had an impact on you and how that fit into your learning of music?
Yeah, so it was taught integrally in my theory education.
You're a lucky student.
Yes, I realize that now. We also were taught the hand signs, which even as an adult, they're better for children, but even as an adult, they truly do cement the function of the scale. So if you're speaking to someone and you're saying that note, that note, it's an A, but how is the A functioning? What is it actually doing in this piece? What is that note doing? So if you're in the key of C, that note is functioning as La. And La has a function in this scale. It knows what it wants to do. It's a very static note. La just hangs and it floats. So when you hear a nice plagal cadence, you hear that La resolve to the So, and it has a very ethereal sound. And Do has a meaningful function in solfege. Do has a feeling. It has a personality. It has a purpose. And every step of the scale has a purpose. Solfege simply gives it a name so that you can say, okay, we have a Do, Mi, So. Well, I know what it's doing then. It's giving you a tonic chord. No matter what key you're in, it has a function. So solfege gives you a language, and it also gives you an attached function to each step in the scale. So in the key of C, Do is C. In the key of A, Do is A. In the key of B flat, Do is B flat. So Do, Mi, So in any key means tonic. In the key of C, in the key of B flat, in the key of F, Do, Mi, So always means tonic. So when you're listening to anything in any key, if you've trained your ear to hear those solfege syllables, you can listen to any song and you can know what is happening. You can hear the melody, you can hear the chords, you can know that was a one chord and, oh wow, I just heard a modulation and now Do is elsewhere, but I still hear the Do, Mi, So. So I feel like solfege truly, along with chord theory, I think they work together, truly helps a musician to be able to train their ear and then make sense of it. And then to be able to communicate that to other musicians. So I know lots of people who have fantastic ears, amazing, can hear anything. They can hear it, they can take it to the keyboard, they can take it to the guitar, to their instrument of choice. And yet if you can't communicate that to other musicians, it loses value. It loses something if you can't create, because really we need to share music. Music is to share, whether we're participating in it together or simply listening together. It is so valuable to be able to share. Can I brag on my son for a minute? I have 5 children. They all went through the Let's Play Music program. They are all fantastic musicians. They are all better than I am, which I'm thrilled about. It is. It's just great. I love it. I have one son, however, that was actually born with a gift, and then having Let's Play Music further school him. He's quite brilliant. So I love going to musical performances with him because he understands them on a level that I can only dream about. And just having that level of satisfaction, fulfillment, enjoyment. Music is emotional and it's a connector. So when we can discuss it intelligently, it's more enjoyable.
I absolutely agree. And I think one thing I've really noticed over the years is that understanding. It's great for communication, as you say, but it can also be really important for a musician's confidence.
For sure, right.
You know, we encounter members at Musical U who know they can kind of improvise or they can kind of figure stuff out by ear, but they have no idea how they do it. And that actually makes them very nervous about it because yes, it worked today and yes, it worked the day before, but if I try it tomorrow, will it work? I don't know because I don't really know where it's coming from. And so I love that example that your son was already able, presumably, to do a lot of these things like play by ear or improvise, but you still saw it was valuable for him to intellectually know what he was doing and why and be able to talk about it intelligently.
Yes, knowledge is power, right? And knowledge is confidence, and having that terminology is really important, like you said, for the connection and for the confidence of the musician. That's a great point. So
you are maybe answering this question just by the story you've told us, but you know, one question that comes up a lot is solfege has kind of a tradition or a reputation as being something associated with children and children's music education. And so people, I think when they come to Musical U and we're recommending that as an approach, they're slightly hesitant because they feel like they're I don't know, they're being put into a children's music class, or they're being taught something that's, more basic than it's useful. But you, by the sounds of it, learned it only as an adult yourself.
Only as an adult, exactly. Only then. And I too thought, isn't this the sound of music? Are we Maria von Trapp? I'm not a child. So I had that same hesitancy when I first knew that that's how we were going to be trained. And yet, days into it, I realized the value and could see the fluidity that it would give my musicianship. It really, truly, solfege is absolutely harnessing the power of music.
So you had this amazing insight and transformation in your college years, and, some people would be satisfied with that and just kind of, benefit from it in their own musical life. But you saw the opportunity to do something much bigger, and you founded Let's Play Music, and which has since been adopted by a huge number of music teachers. I think over 400 music teachers in the US are using the Let's Play Music system now, and you've reached over 20,000 students with that, which is phenomenal. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
And I believe that's really, built on the stuff we've been talking about. The Let's Play Music approach is very much informed by your own experience of this missing piece that had been neglected and often is neglected in music education at all ages. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I mentioned earlier that I was so passionate. I was so changed by this experience that I did not want any human to go through life without this newfound knowledge. And so And also, we know that research tells us that the earlier the exposure is, the better for the human. And so I decided I was going to take chord theory to the 4-year-old, and that's preposterous, right? That cannot be. That cannot happen. And yet it can, and it does, and we do. And so you'll be interested to know this too, Christopher. I don't know if you did know this, but we are piloting a program right now. It's called Let's Play Music Presto. And we have a teacher that's teaching adults the Let's Play Music method. So we're excited to see how this works. The pros of this, obviously, are that an adult can already read music, already knows what letters are, and they can move their hands. The cons are that much of the brain is already hardwired. There's already a lot of synapses that have taken place, and there is much hardening of the brain. But we're anxious to see what happens. We're anxious to see where this goes. But the foundations are the same. The ear needs to be trained to hear the major scale first, then to hear the chords and how the solfege pieces make up the chords. And then the brain can take off and say, now I get it. I get the major scale. I get chords. I can now function any key.
That's really interesting. So tell us more about what Let's Play Music looks like in terms of how the lessons work, what you cover, and what the experience is like for the children.
Sure, I'd love to. So Let's Play Music begins when the children are 4 or 5 years old. This is because this is when the ears are primed for learning and when the brain is ready to make musical connections. Much like language is very important to be introduced to the brain at early ages. Music is a language. So when introduced at this age, the brain internalizes everything much more quickly than an adult would. So the classes are structured very playfully. They are active. There's 6 to 7 children in a class at a time. If you were to look at a Let's Play Music class, you would think it was just game time, musical game time. It doesn't look much like serious instruction unless you are an educator yourself, and then you will recognize the very sneaky education that's happening there. We do sing solfege with hand signs. We use a set of tone bells that is set up like the keyboard so that the children can play and hear the major scale as they play up their tone bells. And then we introduce them to the staff. We help them to see staff relationships, so steps and skips. are visually presented on the staff with cute little balloons and teddy bears and baby feet, so that the child loves the music staff and sees the up, 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 and then plays on the bells up, 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 and can see the relationship of staff to bells, which obviously is the keyboard as well. And then for our harmony instrument, we play the Autoharp. I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with the Autoharp, but it is a stringed instrument where you can push buttons, and each button represents a chord. These buttons mute certain strings so that when one button is pressed and the strings are strummed, it's automatically going to produce that chord. So for a 4 or 5-year-old, we can very easily have them play chords, and they play these chords and accompany themselves, which is a really important part of musicality, to be able to produce within your own body harmony and melody at the same time. And the Autoharp makes this possible for a 4 or 5-year-old. Autoharp isn't really necessary for an adult. They can go straight to keyboard or guitar to produce harmony as they sing a melody. But for musicianship, it's really important to produce those at the same time so that multiple harmonies are being produced and heard, and going, out of the mouth, in the ear, out of the hands, in the ear, all at the same time. I talked in circles there. Did that sound fun?
Yeah, it sounded like a lot of fun. And I'm so happy to hear about your Presto program, because I think, adults, whether they'll admit it or not, crave that kind of fun experience of learning music. I think a lot of us fall into the trap of taking it very seriously because we really care about achieving the goals. But the reality is it can be a game, it can be enjoyable, and arguably it really should be. Music is fun, music is creative, and learning music, I feel, should be the same way. So I'm so excited to see what your Presto classes are like and how that works. I'm confident it'll be a great success.
Yes, thank you.
So that sounds like you're hitting on some really powerful skills. Can you tell us a bit, for example, what would a successful Let's Play Music graduate be able to do that maybe a child of the same age in traditional music education wouldn't feel comfortable with?
That's a wonderful question, Christopher, because often we have parents come to us and they say, well, why should I take Let's Play Music? Why can't I just put my child in traditional piano right now? The reason is traditional piano will teach the names of the white keys on the keyboard. They will learn to play one note at a time for a very long time before they actually produce harmony. They will learn the notes of the names on the staff. And after 3 years, they will be playing it at a beginning level. They will be out of the primer books and be in perhaps a 1A or 1B level, playing probably hands together, maybe one note at a time, hands taking turns a bit. Let's Play Music, however, begins the training with immediate harmony, as I said, with the Autoharp. So the entire first year of Let's Play Music is called preparation for keyboard. We do not see a keyboard. The hands aren't ready for keyboards at age 4 and 5. We play the Autoharp for harmony. We play the tone bells for melody and staff reading, and we listen. This exposure opens the brain for training, for drawing conclusions, for self-instruction. And so the second year, when they actually do get on a keyboard, they almost immediately begin playing chords. And they begin with the simple folk songs that we learned in the first year, and we accompanied ourselves on the Autoharp, but now they play a chord on the keyboard. And we teach them first we teach middle C, because that's foundationally and functionally, you got to know where it is on the staff and on the keyboard. And they learn intervals, so they don't need to know that E is 1/3 above C, but they do know that it's an interval of 1/3. They can see that on the staff and play it on the keyboard. And from there, we learn the primary chords. So they can play the 1, 4, and 5 chord, and they can read those from the staff, and they can sing along. This is amazing. Rather than just singing your typical beginning piano student would sing hot cross buns, hot cross buns, right? This is a typical beginning piece. But in Let's Play Music, we would do hot cross buns, hot cross buns, 1 a penny, 2 a penny, hot cross buns. So much harmony, so much more going into that. So second year, both hands play cadences and scales, all in self-accompaniment. We don't want to be boring with our chords. We want to have some improvisation. So we teach the children by listening to lullabies and marches and calypso music that chords are used to stylize music. So if you want it to sound like a lullaby, you're going to play broken chord, right? That will help it sound like a lullaby. If you want it to have a marching beat, then you're going to play a marching chord. And yes, a 5-year-old can do this. It's wonderful. And then they sing along and they're making music. If you want it to be a little more exciting, you can go. And third year comes along, and that's where we're going to teach them about the root of the chord. So far they've just been experiencing chords holistically. They can read them on the staff, they can play them, they can manipulate the chords. They're reading the staff now too. They can read this, C, D, E, all the way up the staff. We know the names of the notes on the staff. But third year comes along and we teach them about chord structure. So the root of the chord, as you know, is the bottom of the triad. And then the chord is built in thirds above the root. The functionality of the root is you need to be able to find the root both in the written music and with your ear to understand which chord is being played. So when you can find the root, and we have this lovely catchy tune, let's find the root, let's find the root, 'cause it's the root that gives the chord its name, and every chord has got to have a root. So the root's the important thing, right? We have to find the root so that then we can analyze the chord and know what's happening, what key we're in, and what's actually going on in the piece. So this third year, these kids are 6 or 7 years old. They're analyzing chords. They are inverting chords. They transpose from simple keys. They don't do difficult transpositions, but they can do from C to F and F to G and G back to C, and we do some minor as well. So by the time they graduate, as you asked, they're musicians. They're not just pianists, they're musicians. Their ears are trained in a way that they can sing in tune. Many pianists cannot sing in tune. But I'm sure I'm a little bit prejudiced on this, but I feel like if you cannot sing, you're not a complete musician, because you've got to be able to produce those sounds with your body in order to be able to do so many other things. So if that's offensive, I apologize, but that is definitely my opinion.
I think that's fair, and we're on the same page with that one. I think the critical thing in my experience is that adults think it's impossible for them, and so they just shut down if you talk about singing.
Yes.
And once you explain that it is still a learnable skill for them, then you can start to talk about the power of it and the usefulness to communicate to other musicians, or indeed for training your own ears. And at Musical You, when we can help someone get that basic vocal control, it becomes such a powerful part of their toolkit and really rewarding.
Absolutely. And that's wonderful that you are helping adults to realize that it's absolutely possible. I know you have fantastic tools, and I love your articles and your methods and your approach that truly can teach an adult to do this. It's wonderful that it's possible. It's easy when they're little. It's easy when they're
Well, I think you have your own challenges there.
That's true.
That paints a wonderful picture, I think, of the skill level they reach and the different perspective you have, the different direction you're sending those kids on, rather than just let's perfect our Hanon and our repertoire and make sure we're on the track to become a concert pianist, which realistically very few are going to anyway. Instead, you're saying, let's think about what it actually means to feel musical and be musical. And I think just putting in place such a great foundation there for whatever direction they want to go, to do so with confidence and with a lot of expertise that is often lacking in musicians, even those who have a lot of kind of technical skill on their instrument.
Exactly. And we do tell our parents that enroll in the program that their child will graduate a musician ready to excel on any instrument. So when you are a musician, that's the case. When music makes sense to you, any instrument is going to be an easy one to pick up. And I know that's why you spend so much time on that ear, because when the ear is trained, then the musicality falls in place, and then all other skills become accessible. Maybe just give your program a plug and a hooray, just because I truly, when I first was introduced to your program, which was by you contacted us, I'm thinking 4 years ago or so, and I looked at your website, and since then I've looked at your methods, and I just think it's brilliant. I just think that the approach that you have harnessed and the in-depth understanding that you have of music, and also of really pragmatically setting out a course, a class that can teach people these skills that they think are elusive. They think, I'm not a musician. I can't hear that. I can't sing. I can't do that. It's not actually an elusive talent. It's an accessible skill, and it's something that can be cultivated and grown, and it's accessible, and it's so rewarding. It's just incredibly rewarding when you can hear something, when you can produce something. So I just say kudos to you. You're doing a wonderful job. Love the approach, and I think you're doing a wonderful job connecting other musicians, because I think that's another really important thing. We can get very focused in our own our own path, whatever we're currently doing. But when we can step back and learn from each other, when we can draw from each other's experience, frustrations, victories, then we really gain from each other. So hats off to you for doing a wonderful job connecting the music community as well as educating us.
Thank you very much. Well, that certainly is a big part of why we put community at the heart of Musical You. Probably the same reason in a way that you do group music classes for children is that we can learn so much from each other. And although there's benefit in kind of one-to-one instruction, there's huge value from putting people in a shared space where they can observe each other's progress and share each other's ups and downs and learn from one another as much as from the instructor.
Right.
Sure.
It's wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Shelle, for joining us today. Let the audience know where they can learn more about Let's Play Music, whether they're a parent who wants their children to have this amazing experience of learning music early on, or maybe to learn more about your new Presto program and how they can get involved themselves.
Sure. We will be offering Presto a year from now. So 2018 is when we're going to kick that off. All over our website, it's letsplaymmusicsite.com. If you just Google Let's Play Music, will be the top ones. So yeah, join us, watch our videos, and it's really quite amazing. And if you have children that are the right age, find a teacher. Put your zip code in and find a teacher, because we're starting classes now. Actually, this is mid-August. I'm not sure when this will be aired, but classes generally start mid-August, but there are teachers that start year-round too. So find a teacher.
Perfect. Well, we'll definitely have that link and other information about what we've talked about today in the show notes. Thank you again, Shelle, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
The Musicality podcast is brought to you by Musical You. Learn more at musical-u.com.
Amazing. I don't know about you, but I found that conversation so inspiring. I'm someone who's already familiar with solfa and chord theory and already knew a fair bit about Let's Play Music. But hearing Shelle's own story and the passion with which she recounts the discovery of music theory, and hearing her talk about the incredible musicality which their young students learn early on, I just find it so exciting and inspiring. Let's recap the big points there. Shelle was mostly self-taught as a singer and a pianist, and so she missed out on a lot of the music theory that's normally taught alongside instrument skills. In a way, this was a blessing in disguise, though, because it meant that unlike her contemporaries at college, when she was exposed to music theory, it was an incredibly positive experience. As she put it, it blew her mind. For her, discovering chord theory and the solfege system suddenly unlocked all of the underlying frameworks in how music fits together. And things which had previously seemed way out of reach, like modulation or playing by ear, finally made sense to her. Chord theory and solfege can reveal how music works when you listen to it, and connect what you hear with what you play, whether that's Beatles or Mozart. I asked Shelle what it was about the way she was taught theory which made it so impactful, and there were a couple of things. Firstly, she was lucky enough to be in a program where solfege was taught, so that she could learn to recognize scale degrees by ear, and straight away apply that in her musical life. And secondly, it was clear from the way she chose to answer my question with a keyboard in hand that for her, music theory was highly practical from the very beginning. These two things are at the heart of the Let's Play Music approach, which focuses on teaching young children the inner skills of music far more than instrument technique. Students do learn some keyboard skills and singing, but the emphasis is much more on understanding and creating in music, so that from the very beginning they learn music theory organically and in a very practical way. As a result, children as young as 5 or 6 are learning to play melodies by ear or from sheet music and accompany themselves with harmony. They're able to improvise arrangements in different styles, singing melodies and playing chords to match. By the time they graduate at just 7 or 8 years old, they are truly musicians, not just instrument players. I don't know about you, but those kinds of skills were things that I craved when I first learned music. But the focus on just instrument technique and music theory being taught in a very dry, separate, abstract way meant that I never really understood that those things were learnable. I absolutely loved the Let's Play Music approach and the way they're raising a generation of kids to whom musicality comes first, and instrument technique follows easily after. I was surprised and delighted to hear they'll be launching a new program for adults, and I'd highly encourage you to head over to their website for more information about that. The link will be in the show notes. Although solfege in particular might be associated with children and is very useful for them, it's actually equally powerful and possible for adults to learn it, as Shelle herself is in fact an example of. Many of the core foundation skills taught to 4 to 8-year-olds at Let's Play Music are really a great way for adult musicians to connect with their inner musical instinct and start to gain freedom and confidence in music making. So the methodology of Let's Play Music isn't just a great option for young children to get off to a strong and versatile start in music. It's a perfect example of how even adults can learn music in a fun, creative, and empowering way by focusing on the inner skills that let you go beyond just being an instrument player and in fact become a musician. I hope Shelle's story and the explanation of Let's Play Music has inspired you. Whether you choose to explore chord theory or learn solfa, or you just revisit music theory with a much more hands-on attitude, I know that there was plenty in this conversation that could have a huge positive impact on your musicality training. You can learn more about Let's Play Music and locate your nearest classes on the website at letsplaymusicsite.com. And we'll have the link to that and all the other resources mentioned in this episode in the show notes at musicalitypodcast.com. Thanks for listening to this episode. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll be introducing you to solfege and discussing the 2 different systems that are out there and helping you decide which might be right for you.
Thank you for listening to the Musicality Podcast. This episode has ended, but your musical journey continues. Head over to musicalitypodcast.com where you will find the links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive for podcast listeners. That's musicalitypodcast.com.
Hey there, Christopher again. Just a quick word before you take off. This podcast is brand new, and I have 2 things to ask you. Number 1, if you're enjoying the show, please go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to the show, and then rate and review it. This would mean a huge amount to me, and it really helps us get the show out there in front of more people, and that means helping more musicians just like you. The second thing is, I want your feedback. What do you think of the show? If there are things you love, hate, or would like to see us add, if there are guests you think we should interview, or if you have a burning question about musicality that you'd like us to answer on the show, please shoot me an email. It's hello@musicalitypodcast.com. Thanks so much for listening.